My name is Lena Harper. I was 28 years old the Christmas my mother looked at me and said, "This isn't your place anymore." The drive to my childhood home took 6 hours. 6 quiet hours filled with old songs, fading memories, and the kind of hope you don't realize is fragile until it breaks. Snow lined the highway like it was guiding me back. Back to warmth. Back to belonging. Back to the place that was supposed to know me even when I didn't know myself. I hadn't been home in almost a year. Work, life, distance, excuses that sounded reasonable when spoken out loud. But Christmas felt different. Christmas was the one time I still believed things could reset. That families remembered who you were to them. The porch light was on when I arrived. Yellow. Familiar. Inviting. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing in slowly. I could already picture it, Mom's cinnamon candles, Dad's old chair by the fireplace, the clatter of dishes, the noise of people overlapping each other's sentences. Home. I grabbed my bag and stepped out into the cold. The air bit through my coat, sharp and unforgiving. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked up the steps I'd run up 1,000 times as a child. The door stood right in front of me. Same wood, same peeling paint near the handle, same dent from when I'd slammed it once as a teenager and cried about it an hour later. I smiled to myself and knocked. No answer. I rang the bell. Laughter drifted from inside. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't know it's about to hurt someone. Footsteps approached. My shoulders relaxed automatically. The door opened. My mother stood there, wrapped in her favorite cardigan, hair neatly pulled back. She looked calm, not surprised, not relieved, just polite. "Hi," I said softly. "I made it." Her smile faltered, not into confusion, but into something measured, controlled. She looked past me, as if checking the street behind me. Then she said it. "I'm sorry," she began, voice gentle but firm. "This isn't your place anymore." The words didn't land all at once. They hovered, hung in the air between us like they were waiting for permission to hurt. What? I laughed quietly, sure I'd misunderstood. "Mom, it's me." Her expression didn't change. "You should have called," she said. "This isn't a good time." The cold slipped under my skin. "I did call," I whispered. "You didn't answer." She sighed like I was exhausting her, like I was a problem she didn't have the energy to solve. "Lena," she said carefully, "things are different now." Different. I looked past her shoulder into the house. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner. Ornaments I recognized catching the light. Stockings hung above the fireplace. I counted them without thinking. There were 3, not 4. "Can I come in?" I asked. She hesitated. Just a second. But it was enough. "No," she said quietly. "I think it's better if you don't." The door didn't slam. She simply stepped back and closed it. I stood there staring at the wood grain, my reflection faint in the glass. My breath fogged the window. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the sudden understanding that something fundamental had shifted. Inside, the laughter resumed. Music turned up. Someone clinked a glass. Christmas went on without me. My phone buzzed. Mason, my younger brother. I answered. "Hey," he said quickly. "Listen, don't freak out." My throat tightened. Why did Mom say I don't belong here? Silence crackled on the line. "It's complicated," he muttered. "You showing up like this, it wasn't planned." "Planned?" I whispered. "I'm your sister." "I know," he snapped, irritation bleeding through. "But you left. You always leave. You can't just come back and expect things to be the same." I stared at the door. "I didn't leave," I said. "I just stopped fixing everything." He didn't respond. In the background, I heard someone laugh. A woman's voice. Not mine. Mason lowered his voice. "Look, maybe it's better this way." The call ended. I walked back to my car slowly, every step heavier than the last. The house glowed behind me. Warm. full alive. The same house I'd helped keep afloat when Dad lost his job. The same house I'd sent money to without being asked. The same house where my name used to mean reliable. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at my phone. And for the first time, I didn't beg to be let back in. I opened my banking app. And I stopped paying. I didn't drive far that night, just far enough that the house stopped glowing in my rearview mirror. I parked near a closed grocery store, engine still running, heat blasting while my hand stayed cold on the steering wheel. My phone lit up again and again on the passenger seat. Mom, Dad, Mason. Missed calls stacking like accusations. I didn't answer, not because I was angry, because, for the first time, I was quiet enough to hear something else. Clarity. That Christmas night hadn't started anything. It had only exposed what had been there for years. I rested my forehead against the wheel and let the memories come. Not the dramatic ones, not the fights, but the small moments I'd ignored because they didn't seem important at the time. The first time I paid a bill I shouldn't have, I was 19. Dad's hours had been cut. He'd sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples, paperwork spread everywhere. I remember how small he looked that night, how tired. "You're good with money," he'd said, not looking at me. "Could you help us out for a bit?" I'd transferred the money without hesitation. I didn't even ask when I'd get it back. That was what family did. By the time I graduated, it wasn't a question anymore. If something went wrong, it came to me. If something needed fixing, I handled it quietly. I became the invisible solution. They called me strong. They called me independent. They said I didn't need much. What they really meant was that I didn't need care. I moved out first, found my own place, built a life that didn't rely on them, and somehow that became proof that I didn't belong to them either. Every holiday it was the same pattern. "Can you chip in this year?" "Just until things settle." "You don't mind, right? You're always okay." And I was, until I wasn't. Last spring, when I told Mom I might need to tighten my budget, her voice had gone soft in that disappointed way. "We've all sacrificed, Lena. All of us. Except somehow I was the only one expected to keep sacrificing." My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom this time. "You embarrassed us tonight." I laughed once, quietly alone in my car. Embarrassed. I thought about the Thanksgiving before that Christmas. I'd paid for everything. Groceries, wine, dessert. When it was time for pictures, Mom had handed me the phone. "Take one of just us," she'd said, smiling. "You don't mind." I'd stood behind the camera, smiling anyway, telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always had. I drove to a cheap motel that night, the kind with flickering lights and thin walls. I checked in, barely speaking, and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the patterned carpet. I didn't cry. I felt empty, but not hollow. Aware. My phone vibrated again. Mason. I let it ring. Then a voicemail. "Look," he said, voice tense, "Mom's upset. Dad's furious. You didn't have to make this so dramatic. It's Christmas." Dramatic. I replayed his words and realized something that made my chest ache, not with pain, but with understanding. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. In their version of the story, I was the problem. The disruption. The inconvenience. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to distant traffic, wondering when exactly I'd become optional. Sometime around midnight, I opened my banking app again. I canceled the automatic transfers, closed the shared account, revoked the card I'd added Mason to just in case. Each tap felt strange, not vengeful, not cruel, final. By morning, my phone had 63 missed calls. I didn't check them. Instead, I went to a diner across the street, sat alone in a booth with cracked vinyl seats, and ordered coffee and eggs. The waitress smiled at me like I mattered, like my presence wasn't inconvenient. I thought about my birthday last year, how it passed quietly. No call, no card. Later, I saw pictures online of them at dinner together. When I'd asked Mom about it weeks later, she'd frowned. Oh, honey, you should have reminded us. Reminded them I existed. I paid the bill and walked back to the motel slowly. Snow fell softly now, gentle and quiet, covering everything evenly. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Mom didn't say hello. What did you do? She demanded. I stopped paying, I replied calmly. There was a sharp inhale, panic leaking through the line. You can't do that. I did. You don't understand what this means for us, she said. I closed my eyes. When have you ever asked what it meant for me? Silence. Then her voice hardened. Family doesn't abandon each other. I smiled sadly. No, I said. Family doesn't lock each other out either. I hung up, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not guilt. Relief. The backlash didn't come all at once. It trickled in, like a leak behind the walls that finally bursts. At first, the messages were frantic. Please answer. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. By the second day, panic hardened into accusation. My phone buzzed nonstop on the kitchen counter while I stood barefoot in my apartment, staring out the window at the snow-covered street below. The world outside looked calm, untouched. It felt unfair that everything could look so peaceful while my family unraveled behind a screen. I let it buzz. I wanted to see who they were when I wasn't smoothing things over. Dad called around noon. I answered on the fourth ring. What the hell are you thinking? He snapped, skipping any greeting. The rent bounced. The landlord called. I leaned against the counter, coffee cooling in my mug. I stopped paying for things that aren't my responsibility. You don't just stop, he barked. We were counting on that. There it was. Not you. The money. You should have had a backup, I said evenly. I was never meant to be it. His breath hitched. You're acting like a child over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated. Mom shut the door in my face. A pause, then a scoff. You're exaggerating. The word landed heavier than any insult. I was standing in the snow, I said quietly. On Christmas. You always take things personally, he muttered. That's your problem. I closed my eyes. No, I said. That was your luxury. I hung up. Minutes later, Mason called. His voice was sharper now, panic bleeding through his anger. You can't do this to us. I already did. You're ruining everything, he snapped. Mom can't stop crying. Dad's furious. The landlord's threatening notices. I pictured his new car, his paid-off loans, the card I'd added him to for emergencies that became everyday convenience. I cared for years, I said. You just didn't notice. He scoffed. You're acting like a victim. This is just about money. I laughed softly. Is it? Or is it about respect? Silence. Then, predictably, he went for the wound. You think you're better than us now. No, I replied. I think I'm done being used. That night, the group text started. Mom, family meeting. Tonight, Dad, we need to fix this like adults. Mason, you owe us an explanation. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Fine. The house looked the same when I arrived. Warm lights, decorations untouched. The smell of pine and cinnamon clung to the air like a lie. Mom rushed toward me, eyes red, arms half open. You've gone too far, she whispered. We're family. You didn't seem to remember that on Christmas, I said, stepping past her. Dad stood near the fireplace, jaw clenched. Mason paced the room, restless and angry. We can fix this, Dad said. You just need to calm down. I met his gaze. I am calm. That's why this is happening. Mom pressed a hand to her chest. You turned your back on us. No, I replied. You shut the door first. That's not what happened, she insisted weakly. I pulled out my phone. My hands didn't shake. I hit play. Mason's voice filled the room. Careless, dismissive, unmistakable. She still thinks helping with rent means she's automatically included. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom's face drained of color. Dad's head snapped toward Mason. "I didn't mean it like that," Mason stammered. "Yes, you did," I said evenly. "You all did. You just never thought I'd hear it." Mom's voice trembled. "We love you." I shook my head slowly. "You love what I provide." Dad stepped forward, anger flaring. "You think money makes you superior?" "I wanted respect," I said. "I'll settle for peace." Mom broke down then, sobbing. Dad looked torn between fury and fear. Mason stared at the floor. "So that's it?" Mason demanded. "You're just walking away?" "Yes." Dad's voice softened suddenly. Manipulative. Desperate. "Lena, please. We need you." That sentence sealed it. Not want. Not miss. Need. "I'm done," I said. I walked out into the cold without looking back. Their voices followed me. Anger, tears, blame, but none of it stuck. The air outside was sharp and clean. Honest. As I drove away, my phone exploded with messages. I didn't read them. For the first time, I understood something clearly. They weren't angry because I hurt them. They were angry because I stopped saving them. The days that followed weren't loud. They were quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, like standing in a room after everyone leaves and realizing you don't have to clean up the mess anymore. I expected guilt to hit me. I expected regret, doubt, maybe even panic. None of it came. Instead, my mornings slowed down. I cooked real meals instead of grabbing whatever was quickest. I slept without my phone beside my pillow, without bracing for emergencies that were never truly mine. My shoulders began to drop inch by inch, like I'd been carrying something invisible for years and had finally set it down. The messages kept coming. "Mom, you've destroyed this family." "Dad, we never raised you to be this cruel." "Mason, you've ruined everything." Cruel. I stared at that word longer than I wanted to admit. Cruel was standing on a porch in the snow while your family laughed inside. Cruel was being remembered only when something needed to be paid. Cruel was being loved conditionally and told it was sacrifice. Saying no was only cruel to people who benefited from your silence. On the fourth day, there was a knock at my door. I knew who it was before I looked. Mom stood closest, eyes swollen and red. Dad was just behind her, jaw clenched tight. Mason hovered to the side, arms crossed, defensive even now. "We need to talk," Mom said, her voice shaking. "No," I replied calmly, blocking the doorway. "We don't." Dad stepped forward. "You don't get to do this. You turned our lives upside down." I met his gaze evenly. "You were standing on my shoulders. Losing your balance isn't my fault." Mom's voice cracked. "You canceled everything. The rent, the cards. Are you out of your mind?" "Out of my mind for finally stopping." I asked, "Or for noticing?" Dad scoffed. "This isn't just about money. Your father's health." "You didn't call me when he was hospitalized," I said quietly. "You called me when you needed the bill paid." The silence that followed felt heavy, undeniable. Mason shifted uncomfortably. "You're overreacting." I pulled out my phone again. Hit play. His voice echoed between us, careless and dismissive. "She still thinks helping with rent means she's automatically included." Mom's face went pale. Dad turned slowly toward Mason. "Is that true?" Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I said gently. "You just never thought I'd hear it." Mom reached for me. I stepped back. "We love you," she whispered. I shook my head. "You love what I give you." Dad's voice hardened. "Cutting off your family isn't peace. It's cruelty." "No," I replied. "Cruelty is using someone until there's nothing left and calling it love." Mom sobbed. Mason looked away. Dad said nothing. I closed the door. They knocked for a while. Then they stopped. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was late. Weeks passed. I walked without rushing. I laughed without checking my phone. I slept deeply without bracing for the next crisis. One afternoon, a neighbor mentioned in passing that my parents were selling the house. Another time, someone said Mason had taken a job he'd always said was beneath him. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. My phone buzzed last time late one night. "Mom, we lost everything. Your father blames me. Mason won't talk to us. I'm sorry. Please come home." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not in anger. Not in revenge. In clarity. I thought deleting that message would be the end of it. It wasn't. It was just the moment they realized guilt wouldn't work anymore. The next few days were quieter on the surface, but underneath, something shifted. The messages stopped sounding desperate and started sounding strategic, carefully worded, softer, as if they'd finally understood that shouting only pushed me further away. Mom called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was calmer now, tired in a way that almost sounded sincere. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about everything, about my mistakes. I should have handled Christmas differently. I was overwhelmed. You know how things get." An apology without accountability. "I never meant to make you feel like you didn't belong," she continued. "You're my daughter. Of course you belong." I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, listening to the familiar rhythm of excuse wrapped in affection. Belong. Funny how that word only appeared once the payment stopped. That evening, Dad texted, "Can we talk like adults? No accusations, just solutions. Solutions, not understanding, not repair. Logistics." Mason followed an hour later. "You've made your point. Don't drag this out." There it was. They didn't see a boundary. They saw a phase. Something I'd eventually grow tired of. Something I'd undo once they waited me out. For years, that strategy had worked. This time it didn't. I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a walk. The air was crisp, the sky wide and pale. I passed families bundled together, couples arguing gently over nothing important, kids dragging sleds behind them. Once that would have hurt. Now it just existed. I stopped at a cafe I'd never gone into before, sat by the window with a cup of coffee, and watched my reflection in the glass. I looked calmer, older maybe, but steadier. I thought about the version of me that would have folded by now, the one who would have rushed back, smoothed things over, paid whatever was needed just to make the tension stop. She wasn't weak. She was conditioned. I wasn't punishing my family. I was unlearning my role. That night, I wrote something I'd never written before. Not a message to them. A list. Things I was no longer responsible for. Their bills. Their emergencies. Their comfort at the cost of my peace. Their belief that love had to be earned through sacrifice. The next morning, there was another knock at my door. This time only Mom stood there. She looked smaller, older, stripped of certainty. "I just wanted to see you," she said quietly. I didn't step aside. "I'm not here for money," she added quickly. I met her eyes. "Then why are you here?" She hesitated. "I don't know how to fix this." I exhaled slowly. "You don't get to fix it." Her face crumpled. "So that's it? You're cutting us off?" I shook my head. "I'm stepping back." "From your family," she whispered. "From being used," I replied. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either. "You always land on your feet," she said softly. "You don't need us the way Mason does." There it was again. The truth they never meant to say out loud. Because I could survive without them, I was expected to. I gently removed my hand. "That doesn't mean I deserved less," I said. She nodded slowly, tears spilling over. I didn't see it. "I know," I replied. She turned to leave. At the door, she stopped. "If things get better, would you come back?" I thought about the porch, the door, the words. "This isn't your place anymore." I met her gaze calmly. "I already left," I said. And for the first time, I didn't feel cruel saying it. I felt honest. I didn't hear from them after that. Not right away. And when the silence came, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, the kind you don't realize you need until you finally have room to breathe. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Bills still came. Work was still demanding. Some nights were still lonely in that quiet way that sneaks up on you when you're not expecting it. But the weight was gone. The constant tension, the invisible responsibility, the feeling that I was one missed payment away from being loved. It all faded. I started noticing small things instead. How sunlight pooled on my kitchen floor in the mornings. How music sounded fuller when I wasn't bracing for bad news. How my laughter came easier when it wasn't followed by guilt. I stopped waiting for my phone to buzz, and when it finally did weeks later, I didn't jump. It was Mason. I almost didn't answer, but I did. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Stripped of bravado. "We lost the house," he said. I didn't respond right away. "Mom moved in with Aunt Claire," he continued. "Dad staying with a friend. I'm working full-time now." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not sorry enough to fix it, just sorry it hurt. There was a pause. Then, "They keep asking about you." "I know," I replied. "You could help," he said gently, not accusing, almost hopeful. I closed my eyes. "I won't," I said. Another pause. "Yeah," he exhaled. "I figured." When the call ended, I didn't feel relief or sadness, just acceptance. Some relationships don't end with closure. They end with clarity. Months passed. Spring arrived quietly. Snow melted. The world moved forward. I found myself building a life that didn't revolve around being needed. I took a weekend trip alone. I painted my walls a color no one else had an opinion on. I learned what it felt like to rest without justification. One evening, I found an old photo album in the back of my closet. Pictures of a younger me, smiling, hopeful, unaware of how early I'd learned to shrink. I sat on the floor and turned the pages slowly. She hadn't known yet that love could be conditional, that belonging could be revoked, that being useful could replace being cherished. I closed the album gently and placed it back on the shelf. Then I opened my front door and stepped outside. The air was warm, the sky wide and open. For the first time in my life, I understood something deeply. Home isn't a place that keeps score. Family isn't a role you perform. Love isn't proven through exhaustion. And anyone who makes you earn your place has already decided you don't belong. I didn't lose my family that Christmas. I lost a version of myself that believed silence was kindness and sacrifice was love. And I didn't go back, because the moment my mother said, "This isn't your place anymore," she was right. It wasn't. I had outgrown it.